As far as legends are concerned, Bloons Tower Defense doesn't exactly have a ton of them, especially if you don't include the 6th game. And of course, I made a few different videos talking about Matteo Blooner, who has pushed the world record on the Steam version of BTD5 all the way up to around 10,000 and counting. But that doesn't mean there aren't other people pushing the older Bloons Tower Defense games as well. Just a couple months ago, SevJ6 managed to hit round 787 on the Flash version of BTD5, which is a huge world record in its own right. And in this video, I want to talk about someone who often goes forgotten in Bloons Tower Defense today. That being, a player who is known as Halebop. You see, back in the earlier days of Bloons Tower Defense, there weren't exactly a ton of people posting YouTube videos about these games. I mean, it took a lot of effort to screen record a video with decent quality in the first place, and if you were investing in such a setup that could be capable of such a thing, you'd most likely be trying to play games that would actually guarantee a decent level of viewership. And so, it is exceedingly rare to find high quality footage of the early Bloons Tower Defense games, and even more rare to find from people who were actually capable of achieving really high rounds, or especially world records in the case of Halebop. But he was a part of the exception as opposed to the part of the rule, with Halebop achieving round 200 in Bloons Tower Defense 4 and posting high quality footage of it all the way back on December 30th of 2011 when BTD5 had only been out for 2 weeks itself. And the craziest part about this is that just 2 years ago, Mac and Rules made this video about how far you can ultimately get in BTD4. Where he should have run by Halcyon Zomboid, that goes all the way up to the game's limits of round 251, where Bloons basically just stopped spawning. And it took him around 150 hours to get to this limit, so you can only imagine how insane it must have been for Halebop to make it up to round 200 all the way back in late 2011. And he didn't really have any community support like Reddit or Discord or honestly anything that was going to make this an easier process. And without any sort of guarantee that many people would even see the records you would accomplish either, you definitely have to consider just how insane it was for Halebop to go for so many records within BTD4 and BTD5. And that's not to take anything away from what Zomboid accomplished, but I do think it's pretty important to note how much different the atmosphere of gaming was on YouTube nearly 14 years ago, especially when it comes to these more obscure games. And in any case, not only did they set a big world record in Bloons Tower Defense 4, but Halebop would also begin posting BTD5 records as well. Now, you have to keep in mind that back in late 2011, and for several years after, the only version of BTD5 available was the one that we had released on Adobe Flash. I mean, to be fair, there was an iOS port released in 2012 as well, but that wouldn't really be significant to the history of record progression in this game. However, it was quite significant when Halebop managed to get all the way up to around 200 on the Flash version of the game before 2012 had even begun, meaning they accomplished it within the first 2 weeks of the game's release. Although, unfortunately, we don't currently have any footage from that run available. But what we do have is a tutorial that Halebop made on the 4th of January 2012 about how to, well, get up to round 200. And I'm not sure how many people would have been following this back in the day, considering how tough it was and really still is today for computers to deal with the older BTD late games and how unoptimized their coding was. But one thing I do want to mention is how in these early games of BTD5 on Flash, the Bloons didn't seem to gain extra speed and health the way that they do today during free play. I mean, they were still getting faster, but I don't think that the extra health part was really, well, a part of free play yet. And it's hard to tell when things were changed, but if I had to guess, I'd say it was probably on March 22nd of 2012 when BTD5 had some major balance changes. But even with free play now being harder than ever before, Halebop was far from being done setting records. before anything had even changed, he pushed the record all the way up to round 270 while playing on Monkey Lane as well. And the crazy thing is that he was also playing on hard difficulty, but I think that used to be the standard in this game, considering that someone managed to push all the way up to round 269 right before he got to round 270. But I also think that Halebop could have pushed further had he wanted to, considering that we don't have a clip of him losing or anything, but in any case, things were about to get a lot more interesting than they already were. Now, if you guys have played BTD5 a decent amount yourselves, you'll probably know that the track Switch isn't exactly easy. In fact, it was ranked as an advanced difficulty track in Bloons Tower Defense 5 on the Flash version, and so it was pretty incredible when on just February 8th of 2012, Halebop would post this video, getting all the way up to around 207 on the map. And what's more insane about it is the fact that you can see how second place was only sitting at round 119. Wait. So that was only for the last week, and you're telling me that the actual record was round 199? Well, still, 207 is definitely domination over 199, so hey man, I definitely want to say that Halebop was doing something pretty incredible regardless. And shortly after the free play changes were made in BTD5, he would go on to pull off the highest round that this game had ever seen, which would end up being kept in secret for around 6 months. And apparently, that's because at the time, Halebop had actually been asked to keep his accomplishment, well, a secret, in order to not ruin the mystery of the game. And I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see them, but yeah, I mean, this is obviously really ridiculous. But after another player named S2IT would finally surpass Halebop, he felt inclined to post his round 400 run. And there is something pretty important to note in his description as well. Right here, where he talks about how he's ready for all the insults and to be accused of cheating, this really demonstrates why so many of the early record holders from our community ended up just moving on from the game. A lot of people used to latch onto the idea where it was normal to call anyone who achieved high rounds a cheater, and when it was already so hard for most people to get high quality footage of their runs in the first place, I can only imagine how many players were discouraged and were just straight up turned off from ever attempting to get their own high records in the older Bloons Tower Defense games when this is what they had to deal with. And the reason I'm making such a big point about this is because, well, that round 400 run would end up being the last video that Halebop ever posted. In the span of less than 1 year, Halebop has shown us that he was capable of achieving incredible records in both Bloons Tower Defense 4 and BTD5 as well. But this actually wouldn't quite be the end of his legacy yet either, because on an unknown date in 2012, Halebop would actually take his record back from S2IT by managing to make it all the way up to around 452. But unfortunately, just like how the date of this is unknown, there isn't a surviving video of it either, which I don't want to speculate on, but I have to wonder if that video description from his round 400 run had anything to do with Halebop not wanting to continue posting his records to YouTube. But in any case, as far as we know, round 452 is the furthest that Halebop has ever gotten in BTD5, and this record would end up standing for over a year, not being surpassed until a player named Big Cube Fan would make it all the way up to around 500 on December 5th of 2013. And like I had said in the beginning of this video, even today, the world record on Flash stands at an astonishing round 787. So for Halebop to have gotten into the mid 400s all the way back in 2012 is honestly really impressive. And I just want to end this video by saying that if I can ever get the chance to get in contact with him, maybe even do an interview or just discuss their accolades in this game in general, I would truly be honored. My Discord server is always pinned in the description of these videos, and so if any of you guys out there happen to be in contact with Halebop, or if somehow he's actually watching this video for himself, well, man, just maybe let me know. And if you'd ever be interested in talking, that would be really awesome. But with that being said, I really do hope that all of you out there enjoyed this video. And here's another one that YouTube thinks you might like as well.